My name is Wright. I am the voice of reason. I speak for the Last Crusade.
Suppose you had been hired by the devil to be his counselor and advisor, and your task was to tell the Prince of Darkness how best to turn the souls of mortal men away from light and truth and joy, and to bring them into eternal woe. What would the devil's advocate advocate? The first and greatest lie of the devil is that the devil does not exist. This, taken by itself, is not credible. No one with unclouded eyes looking at the horrors, enormities, perversions, absurdities, and self-righteous nonsense idolized by the modern age can fail to see the devil's hand in it. In the ancient world, when men were less easily deceived, the idols to which men bowed were open and obvious. Their idols were looming things of brass or stone or painted wood, visible in the temples and town squares, or perched on hilltops. Men bowed and served them and called them divine, but never knew they were deceived into worshipping devils. Even here, however, the deception was slight. The good things of creation, the sky and sea, the stars and seasons, bird and beast, the lightning bolt and earthquake, and the passions of war or love, have a beauty and a majesty worthy of fear and respect. To give names and faces to these natural wonders, and to turn that respect into reverence, and then that reverence into rites of adoration, is but a small step. The impulse to serve and to adore the Creator was created in us. It is fit and right and natural for creatures of our nature, just as a child's love for his father is natural. But this impulse can be corrupted and twisted into the adoration of inferior things, created things, whereupon the natural becomes the unnatural. The natural stream of spiritual life is dammed, the unnatural channel of idolatry is sought. But even the pagans knew the adulteries of Jupiter, or the deceptions of Odin, or the dalliance of Krishna with the shepherd maidens, or the infanticides of Saturn, were worthy of condemnation, rather than imitation. Even though they were called gods, the tales told by their own poets depicted them as devils, and in the case of Cybele, Moloch, Kali, or Tezcatlipoca, so did the bloody acts of their votaries. Pagan philosophers, such as Aristotle or Socrates, were wise enough to deduce the existence of a single supreme being, the first cause and final end of all things. These philosophers were wise enough to condemn the Olympian adulterers and murderers worshipped by their fellows as being fables. One was condemned to exile for revealing the true nature of the pagan gods, the other to drink hemlock and die. Generations have passed. Now that the lamp of the church has shined the light of truth on all these things and showed them in their proper forms, the more daring deception is required to cloud the eyes of the unwary. Only by denying the supernatural as a whole can the idols be revived, this time as secular idols. No longer are the idols monuments of marble or bronze placed where anyone can see. Now they are called ideologies, political parties, causes, movements, and they are placed inside the hearts of men. No more need is there for Moloch to call children to be flung into the fire or baked alive in hollow brass statues where the screams of dying infants can be heard by one and all. Now Planned Parenthood meets in air-conditioned boardrooms or swank hotels, their expenses paid by you, the taxpayer, to discuss how to harvest and sell the organs of children accidentally born alive and then smothered by chloroform. The press goes to any lengths as needed to bury and obfuscate the story. Any investigative reporter who reveals their true nature is condemned to lawsuit and libel rather than to a cup of hemlock. Dr. Seuss writes children's books about a wise little gnome who upbraids factory owners in defense of the harvested trees, for whom otherwise no one speaks. No one writes books about wise little gnomes who speak for the harvested children of men, slain by their own mothers. No more need is there for the temple prostitutions and abominations of the cults of Ishtar or Ganymede. The sexual revolution has painted these sins with the unconvincing luster of liberty, self-expression, self-determination, and other shibboleths meant to hide the nature of the sin by changing the name of the sin. So if the devil is dismissed as unreal, all evils must be regarded as psychological or social or economic. That is, a fault of our political institutions, not of our souls. From this comes the second great lie, that original sin does not exist. Man is told that man is infinitely malleable and can be cured of all imperfections by sufficiently ruthless social engineering. Here, politics is the idol that takes the place of Christ in the minds of the postmodern age. Caesar is their savior, Utopia is their paradise, and the revolution is their second coming. So any question defining the nature of rich and poor, male and female, equal and unequal, and drawing any theological or moral conclusion therefrom, is replaced with a political question: how to use the power of the state to change human nature. The view of man involved is the same as popularized by that high-Q intellectual Hannibal Lecter. Man is not a soul, man is meat. As meat, he may be bred like a bull and slaughtered like an ox. All social engineering projects, from great to small, from the Holocaust of the National Socialist German Workers' Party to the eugenics and euthanasia proposed enthusiastically by various intellectuals, to the pro-LGBT propaganda taking the place of simple superhero tales in once popular comic book lines, all spring from the conclusion that man is an animal, man is a meat robot, man is an object. Hannibal Lecter would approve. Now, the devil is a spirit, and he knows in his damned heart that man is a spirit. But to lure man away from man's true nature and into hell, it is useful to spread the doctrine of materialism and to tell the gullible a third great lie, namely that man is matter only. Because of this, the devil's party never identifies itself as a cult with a fundamentally spiritual and religious purpose, even though they act like cultists in thought and word and deed. In this, they are like the ancient idols who claim divinity while acting like devils. The devil's party use political-sounding words like liberal, left-wing, progressive, socialist, communist, fascist, and revolutionary to hide their nature. If their concerns were political, their concerns would be restricted to political questions. That is, namely, to questions concerning laws and institutions, the armed forces, the courts of law, public works, and common efforts meant to maintain peace and civilization. In reality, their concern is with all aspects of life, all moral questions, including unspoken thoughts. The devil's party merely refers to these things as political because, being secular, they seek salvation from the sword hand of Caesar rather than the pierced hands of Christ. If it seems odd to you, dear reader, to regard the question of what human life is, or when it is proper to take human life, or why some men dress like women and demand to be called women, or when it is proper to take the private property of others for public use, or whether it is worse to kill a black man as a white man if that's a hate crime, or worse to break an unhatched sea turtle egg as it is to kill an unborn baby, as medical, ethical, or theological questions and not as political questions, if this seems odd to you, then the devil's party has successfully deceived you. These are all theological, ethical, medical, and moral questions, not political. Small wonder, then, that the conservative movement in this nation has been so spectacularly ineffective at opposing this onslaught against common sense. Conservatism has been blinkered from the onset. By treating these deep theological and philosophical questions as merely matters of secular politics, the conservative bring a knife to a gunfight. Secular matters are open to compromise. Sacred matters are not. The pragmatic conservative spirit compromises, and the idealistic devil spirit does not. One side is willing to negotiate, the other is not. So the needle only ever moves one way, always more to the left. Facts overthrow the worldview of this new breed of idolater, and so facts are never consulted. To refer to reality is regarded as pettifoggery, and ironically called unscientific and unintelligent. Now, this impulse to ignore the deceptive appearances in the world and cling to spiritual truths, to walk by faith and not by eyesight, was also created in us and created for a good purpose. It is an impulse of loyalty and fidelity, like the unwillingness to believe a spy or impostor, despite whatever forged credentials he might show. When used to spurn the earth and embrace heaven, this impulse is natural and fit. However, in the devil's party, the same impulse is perverted. They cling to their insane narrative and defy facts, ignoring the true appearances of the world, and cleaving to utopian fantasies, to fake news, to junk science, and to hysterical conspiracy theories. The natural stream of truth is dammed, and the unnatural channel of flattering falsehoods is sold. When perverted, this impulse towards faith becomes a faith in faithlessness. It becomes a conviction that truth does not exist, especially spiritual truth. Only power is real. In sum, if you were the devil's advocate, you would be wise to advise the Prince of Darkness to pursue the following 3 basic strategies and promote these 3 basic lies. The first lie, denying spiritual reality, says there is no devil. This is a supreme and supremely useful lie. This allows all theological and moral questions to be treated as secular, and specifically to be treated as political. This movement moves ever farther from the true and the factual and ever closer to the politically correct. There is no room for faith in the New World Order. The second lie is that Caesar is the savior. Political correctness looks nowhere but toward the power of the government to define truth, change reality, create utopia. The mere fact that utopia does not exist is ignored. So there is no room for hope in the New World Order. The third great lie is that man is meat, meant only for consumption. Political correctness at this point is indistinguishable from despair and damnation. There is no room for charity, peace, benevolence, love, or life in the New World Order. There is no room, in fact, for anything but the devil. So if you were the devil's advocate, and if you saw what he meant to do and how he meant to do it, you would have a unique clarity of insight on the nature, the tone, and the point of the talking points used to shout down the voice of reason in the modern day. And you would know the reason why reason has fled.